So picture this. It's the 1960s, and lawmakers in Washington are holding like actual serious congressional hearings because they're completely terrified of this new existential threat.
Right, the whole computerized man panic.
Exactly. They were
Oh.
calling it the computerized man, and they painted this incredibly bleak dystopian picture where mainframe computers were just going to, strip away all our individuality and turn citizens into these mindless punch card automatons.
Which is wild to think about now.
It really is. But does it sound familiar? Because today we are basically having the exact same panic, just swapping out mainframes for artificial intelligence. I mean, you look at the headlines and the narrative is just overwhelmingly apocalyptic.
Oh, absolutely. But it's actually the default human response to rapid systemic change.
Yeah.
We instantly project our absolute worst fears onto the blank slate of any new technology.
Yeah.
Like when we talk about AI today, the visual that immediately pops into most people's heads is the Terminator, right?
Oh, for sure. Arnold Schwarzenegger kicking down the door.
Exactly. A relentless autonomous machine that's just coming to replace us. But the excerpts we are analyzing today from the book Superagency by Reid Hoffman and Greg Beto, well, they ask us to flip that visual entirely.
Right.
The authors argue that we really need to view ourselves as homo techne.
Homo techne.
Yeah, humans as tool makers. Because our tools have always shaped our cognitive evolution, just as much as we shape them. And the goal here isn't to stop the future, but to actively steer it.
And that is exactly the mission for this deep dive. We are going to actively push past that knee-jerk doom and gloom response. We're going to explore how AI, rather than ending humanity, might actually act as like the steam engine of the mind.
I love that phrasing.
Right. Dramatically expanding our individual and collective power and bringing about this era of what the authors call superagency.
So to map out how we get to superagency, I think we first have to look at the massive psychological whiplash of the last few years.
Oh yeah, whiplash is the right word.
Just think back to the release of ChatGPT in late 2022. The system shock to society was so profound that by the spring, you had tens of thousands of people signing these open letters.
Right, the Future of Life Institute letter.
Yeah, literally begging for a global 6-month pause on training advanced AI models. And it ended up fracturing the tech community and really society at large into 4 distinct camps based on, how they process the future.
And the book breaks these camps down so brilliantly. Like first you have the doomers, who literally model AI as an extinction-level event.
Skynet, basically.
Exactly. Then you have the gloomers, who are hyper-focused on near-term harms, things like massive job loss or algorithmic bias, and they want strict top-down prohibition and regulation.
Yeah.
On the total opposite end, you have the zoomers, who just want absolute freedom to innovate with zero government regulation. Just hit the gas and go.
And then finally, you have the camp the authors place themselves in, which are the bloomers.
The bloomers.
Yeah. It's an optimistic framework, but it's not like blind techno-utopianism.
Yeah.
Bloomers actually believe in broad public participation and something they call iterative deployment.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because iterative deployment kind of sounds like a polite corporate term for, releasing experimental tech into the wild and seeing what breaks.
That's definitely the gloomer critique of it, yeah.
Right. To a skeptic, it sounds reckless. You're treating society like lab rats.
Yeah.
I mean, people look at big tech and see an extractive industry. So isn't the bloomer approach basically treating AI like agriculture instead of mining? You plant a seed, see how it adapts to the soil, and adjust your farming techniques rather than just extracting resources until they're gone?
That is exactly the right analogy. The gloomer mindset fundamentally miscategorizes what this technology is. They apply that extraction model like mining for coal, where you just take a finite resource and leave a hollowed out mountain to a technology that is actually agricultural, like you said. The bloomer approach is about cultivation, putting the tools in the hands of real users to learn and adapt safely over time. You observe how the AI adapts to the real-world climate, rather than just hypothetical lab conditions.
And I guess that implies the tool is adapting to us rather than just acting on us.
Exactly. And that is a profound shift. For the last 10 years, AI was basically a hidden mechanism that acted on you, like a newsfeed algorithm hijacking your dopamine.
Right. You didn't really opt in.
Exactly. But large language models operate on a totally different paradigm. The AI acts with you and for you.
Okay, but testing a new coding assistant or a math tutor is one thing. If we're talking about iterative deployment testing in the real world, What happens when the stakes involve actual human psychology?
That's the big question.
Because the book introduces this concept called problemism, which is basically the gloomer default mode. It's this obsession with what could go wrong while completely ignoring the existential threat of the status quo.
And the status quo in mental health is a literal crisis. We have over 120 million Americans living in areas with a designated shortage of mental health professionals.
Wow, 120 million.
Yeah. And even if you aren't in one of those areas, you're looking at 3 to 6 month wait list just to see a therapist.
Which is why the whole Coco app controversy was so telling. Like, if you're listening right now and feeling a little uneasy about AI being used in mental health, you're definitely not alone.
Oh, people had a very visceral reaction to it.
Totally. So Coco was this peer-to-peer mental health network. And the developer, Rob Morris, used GPT-3 to help users co-write empathetic responses for cognitive reappraisal.
Basically a co-pilot for kindness.
Exactly. And the users actually rated the AI-assisted messages incredibly highly. But when it went public, the internet just erupted in outrage over this idea of simulated empathy.
What's fascinating here is that the system actually worked. It provided immediate, high-quality emotional support. But critics claimed it was inherently harmful, even though Coco was totally transparent and literally nobody was harmed.
Right.
It was textbook problemism. But when you look at the actual data, the potential is just staggering. Researchers from Talkspace and LaceN.io analyzed something like 160,000 text-based therapy sessions.
160,000. That's a massive data set.
Massive. And they used AI to basically open the black box of psychotherapy. They wanted to see what actually works. And they found these counterintuitive insights, like when a human therapist spends time giving information, just explaining things, it actually leads to poorer outcomes.
Well, really?
Yeah. But when they use complex reflections, validating the emotion and echoing it back, the outcomes improve significantly. And AI can do complex reflections flawlessly. Imagine having abundant, always-on care where finding a perfect therapeutic fit is as easy as picking a movie on Netflix.
Zero costs, zero wait lists.
Exactly. It totally eliminates cost and access barriers. And interacting with that simulated empathy can actually increase our own capacity for human kindness.
But wait, doesn't simulated empathy just feel inherently hollow? Or is it like a pacemaker for the mind?
Yeah.
It might be synthetic, but if it keeps the heart beating, does it matter?
That's a great way to put it. The functional outcome is what matters. If your nervous system is regulated, does your brain really care if the complex reflection came from a human or an algorithm?
I mean, probably not in the moment of crisis. But to build an AI that accurate, you need an invasive amount of data, which naturally leads into the whole debate over surveillance capitalism and who actually profits from our lives.
Right, the data privacy debate.
Because it takes us right back to the 1960s. People were terrified of a national data center. Vance Packard warned that we were going to be wrapped in chains of plastic tape.
But the reality was the exact opposite. The data explosion actually led to greater self-expression and basically the end of the monoculture. We got hyper-personalization instead of rigid conformity.
True, but Shoshana Zuboff has that famous critique of surveillance capitalism. She argues that companies like Google just turn us into an abandoned carcass to extract our behavioral surplus.
And Zuboff's critique is really popular, but the authors counter it with the concept of the private commons and consumer surplus.
Okay, what is consumer surplus?
It's the unmeasured value generated for the user. So Eric Brynjolfsson ran this amazing study. He asked people how much they'd have to be paid to give up free digital services. To give up Facebook for a month, users wouldn't do it for less than $48.
Okay, that makes sense.
But to give up search engines for a year, they demanded over $17,500.
Wait, $17,500 just to give up Google?
Yeah. And Halvarian points out something similar with photography. In 2015, humanity took 1.6 trillion digital photos. If you price that at old film processing rates, like 50 cents a photo, that is an $800 billion value handed directly to consumers for essentially zero cost.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like we're trading our privacy for convenience. Is this just a giant digital toll booth? We don't pay with cash, we pay with our data. But aren't the tech giants still the ones hoarding the real wealth?
Well, the key here is that digital data is non-rivalrous.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning it's not like a physical pasture where if too many cows eat the grass is gone. You know, the tragedy of the commons. With digital data, the more people who use an app like Waze, the more valuable the map gets for everyone else.
Oh, because more traffic data makes the routing better.
Exactly. The private commons relies on AI models getting smarter and safer with our collective data.
Okay, but how do we actually measure that safety? Because the media narrative is always about this irresponsible AI arms race. We hear that labs are just recklessly sprinting toward AGI.
Right, but the reality inside the industry is totally different. It's driven by an obsessively comprehensive testing culture. They use these things called benchmarks.
Like standardized tests for AI.
Pretty much. You have super GLU for language, real toxicity prompts for safety, truthful QA for facts, and they force rapid improvement. For example, early on, GPT-3 produced toxic outputs about 23.3% of the time.
That's pretty high.
It is. But through benchmarking, by the time they released GPT-4, they got that toxicity down to 0.73%.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, wait, but let me jump in here. If an AI is just a hyper-advanced autocomplete, aren't benchmarks just teaching to the test? If I memorize the answers to a French exam, I still can't survive in Paris. Are these models actually reasoning or just cheating by memorizing the training data?
You're talking about the data contamination problem, which is a massive debate. But there's this incredible Microsoft study that addressed exactly this. They asked GPT-4 to draw a unicorn.
Okay, sounds simple enough.
But they asked it to draw it using a programming language called TIXI.
TIXI, I don't even know what that is.
Most people don't. It's a highly complex tool used by academics to draw mathematical graphs with code. Crucially, there are absolutely 0 images of unicorns drawn in TIXI on the internet.
Oh, so it couldn't have just memorized it.
Exactly. The model had to abstractly reason. It had to understand what a unicorn looks like, break that down into geometric shapes, and then write the raw code to place a triangle on top of an oval. And it did it. It proved the model was actually reasoning abstractly.
That is one.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, absolute explainability, knowing exactly how the AI came to an answer, is an impossible standard. Even for humans, we don't demand perfect explainability from a human doctor's intuition. We should be focusing on acceptable error rates instead.
And focusing on how regular people prefer the models, right? Like the chatbot arena.
Yes, Chatbot Arena is brilliant. It's a crowdsourced, blind A/B testing platform. 2 anonymous models generate an answer, and the human user votes on which is better.
So human preference dictates the leaderboard.
Exactly. The authors call it regulation the internet way. It's a shift from waiting for bureaucratic permission to having real-time accountability.
Which brings us right into the whole debate over how governments should actually handle this, because you basically have 2 opposing philosophies here. The precautionary principle and permissionless innovation.
Right. And the precautionary principle is basically the idea that a new tech is guilty until proven innocent. It comes from 1970s environmentalism. You have to prove it's 100% safe before you deploy it.
Whereas permissionless innovation is what built the modern internet in the 90s, like Section 230.
Exactly. And the book compares today's AI panic to the early 1900s automobile. By 1923, cars were causing massive fatalities. People were calling them devil wagons.
Devil wagons.
Yeah, and imagine the counterfactual. What if President Taft had invoked the precautionary principle and banned cars from going over 25 miles per hour? Or mandated speed bumps every 100 feet?
We would have lost an entire century of incredible economic growth and individual agency.
Precisely. Because safety evolved iteratively with the car. Charles Kettering invented the electric starter in 1912 to stop people from breaking their arms on hand cranks. William Phelps Eno privately funded the first traffic rules in New York.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We didn't invent the seatbelt before we invented the engine. We innovated to safety. But pushing back a car crash is physical and localized. And AI making a catastrophic error scales globally in milliseconds. Can we really afford permissionless innovation when the stakes are instant?
It's a valid fear, but the authors argue that the speed of scaling also applies to the fixes. The immune system of the private commons updates globally in milliseconds too. And if we lock it down, we lose the massive upside.
The superagency.
Right. If cars gave us unprecedented physical mobility, AI is about to give us unprecedented informational mobility.
Like GPS for the mind.
Exactly. Think about the history of physical GPS. It started as this scrambled, classified military tool. Then, after a tragedy in 1983, Ronald Reagan opened it up. And in 2000, Bill Clinton finally removed selective availability.
And suddenly it turns into a $1.4 trillion economic engine.
Yep. LLMs are informational GPS. Just as GPS helps us navigate physical space, AI helps us navigate the 21st century's insanely complex informational landscape, translating contracts, learning code, understanding dense topics.
And now it's multimodal. You have models like GPT-4o that can literally see through your smartphone camera. It becomes a fully present sensory companion.
This raises an important question, though, about democratization. There was an MIT study showing that less experienced workers who used ChatGPT completed tasks 37% faster.
37%.
Yeah. And the biggest quality boost went to the workers who initially scored the lowest. It's an incredible upskilling effect that levels the playing field for people outside traditional hubs of intelligence.
It's like having an informational all-wheel drive. You don't need to be a professional off-road driver to navigate rough terrain anymore. But does this mean we're outsourcing our actual human skills? Or just outsourcing the friction?
The authors would argue we're just outsourcing the friction. We're freed up to focus on the destination rather than the mechanics of steering.
So, to kind of wrap up this deep dive, it's really easy to look at AI and just see Big Brother or a Terminator. But the reality is that we are Homo techni. If we embrace iterative deployment, AI isn't some massive extraction operation. It's a private commons that transforms big data into big knowledge, giving every single individual that superagency.
Perfectly said.
And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final kind of provocative thought to mull over. There was a recent study that showed human doctors actually rated AI responses as more empathetic than the responses from actual human doctors.
Which is just wild to think about.
Right. So if we spend our days interacting with AI models that are infinitely patient, profoundly knowledgeable, and tirelessly empathetic, is it possible that spending time with machines won't dehumanize us, but might actually teach us how to be more humane to each other? Something to think about.